All right, so false positives in a drug test, basically. So false positives happen when a medication or a chemical structure has a cross-reactivity with an immunoassay, either due to similarity in the structure of the parent or the metabolites. So this depends on the type of immunoassay, and if you get a positive or you think you have a false positive, it's sent off for confirmatory testing, usually via GCMS, or gas chromatography mass spectrometry. So first example is venlafaxine or Effexor, which is on the left. It's used for major depressive disorder and some anxiety disorders. It's also used maybe off-label for hot flashes. On the right, we have Tramadol, which is a synthetic opioid used for like moderate to severe pain. It's a Schedule IV controlled substance in the US. So you can get a false positive for Tramadol when you're on something like venlafaxine. That's possible. So this is the mass spec of Tramadol. So Tramadol has a molar mass of 263 about. That's what this peak or the parent peak is over here. And then we have the fragmentation pattern, which is everything to the left of the parent peak. So when you input energy to ionize the molecule, it undergoes other reactions to lower mass molecules like these. Over here we have the base peak, which is the most common fragment, either because it has multiple ways to produce said molecule, or it's a relatively stable ion. This is the mass spec of venlafaxine. It has a molar mass of about 277, and then we see that in the parent peak at the far right. We also see a base peak over here with a substance with a molar mass of 58. So this is Tramadol again. We get alpha cleavage over here by the tertiary amine and the cyclohexanol ring, which forms this little imine ion over there at the top right with the molar mass of 58, along with methoxyphenyl cyclohexene. PCP or angel dust can also flag as a false positive if you're on venlafaxine. So PCP or phencyclidine is a dissociative anesthetic. It is an NMDA or N-methyldeaspartate receptor antagonist. It was used in the 50s as an IV anesthetic, and then in the 60s we used PCP to derive ketamine, which replaced PCP in about the 70s as an anesthetic because it had a shorter duration of action, and then it also had lower risk of behavioral toxicities as well as hallucinogenic effects. So this is ketamine. We use it in the hospital, for example, for patients in the ICU as a multimodal pain approach, using a bunch of different types of medications to help with pain and also as analgesic sedation. So it helps with pain and then also sedation. So the S enantiomer, S-ketamine or Spravato, is an intranasal formulation for treatment-resistant depression or major depressive disorder. It's administered usually about 2 times a week for a month, and then it's weekly for a month, and then it can be moved to every other week or still remain weekly for a month. The black box warning, of course, you need to monitor because of these dissociative effects in a healthcare setting for about 2 hours after administration. Another drug that can flag as a false positive for PCP is dextromethorphan. This is in Dayquil, NyQuil, Robitussin, and Delsum. So dextromethorphan is in a combo product called Nuedexta. It's for pseudobulbar affect. It's quinidine and dextromethorphan. Quinidine inhibits the metabolism of DXM. Another combo product is Auvelity for major depressive disorder, and it is bupropion and dextromethorphan comboed. Bupropion also inhibits the metabolism of dextromethorphan. So DXM is also an NMDA receptor antagonist, so we get dissociative effects, mainly at higher doses, and then it's also a serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, as well as a sigma-1 agonist. I always like to look at charts like this that pretty much give me an idea of receptor affinity. So at the top left we see NMDA receptor, DXM, and then its metabolite dextrorphan. So the lower the number, the stronger the binding affinity. We see that the DXO has higher binding affinity to the NMDA receptor, so it has more dissociative effects. And then we also see its affinity with SERT, which is the serotonin transporter, and NET, which is the norepinephrine transporter. So we see that it has a higher affinity for the serotonin transporter over the norepinephrine transporter, and then not really any affinity with the dopamine transporter. So on this chart, we have at the very top NMDA, which is a glutamate receptor. We have sigma-1, sigma-2, the mu opioid receptor, delta, kappa, the 3 transporters I talked about. These are some serotonin receptors. Then we have adrenergic receptors like alpha-1, alpha-2, beta's on here too, dopamine 2, histamine receptors, muscarinic, nicotinic receptors, and then voltage-gated sodium channels. I like charts like this because I can see like what receptor subtype a serotonin does a drug act on, or is this medication anticholinergic? Like how anticholinergic is it? It just helps me give a little breakdown and then also derive like side effects from medications. So a little tangent, something that's interesting. Again, this is dextromethorphan. Boom, this is levomethorphan, which is an opioid. It's an enantiomer, which is a mirror image. It's about 5 times stronger than morphine. So boom, side by side, dextromethorphan, levomethorphan. So levomethorphan undergoes O-demethylation, that's where the little hydroxyl is, into levorphanol, which is 8 times as potent as morphine. Levorphanol is a Schedule II medication. It acts on all 3 opioid receptors, mu, delta, kappa, and then it also has NMDA antagonism as well as SNRI activity. I will also mention that dextromethorphan usage can cause false positives with opioids. Dextromethorphan is in a class of medications called morphinins. This is the structure of a morphinin. This is oxy or oxycodone. It has a morphinin-like structure added with this little ring at this top left. So with opioids, we have the A ring, B ring, C ring, D ring here, it's hard to see, but it's this little bridge with this nitrogen, and E ring. So a nice little side-by-side picture of dextromethorphan and oxycodone. We see oxy has this added little E ring, but similar backbone. Some other medications that I've heard can rarely also cause a false positive with PCP are Benadryl, Daxylamine, which is in Unisom. Some patients will pair this with vitamin B6 for nausea and vomiting related to pregnancy, ibuprofen. And also lamotrigine, which is sometimes used for seizures, and then it's also used for a mood stabilizer in patients with bipolar, mainly for bipolar depression.